Hello and welcome to a reading of issue 41 of my newsletter, reflecting on 2023 and predictions for 2024. This was my second holiday issue, my first holiday issue. I got some feedback on, let's say, is it was kind of negative about a holiday that tends to be pretty positive valence, Christmas, where people feel a lot of positive Christmas feelings, but I wanted to air out some of the negative feelings about holiday season as well, and kind of give them their fair shake. But this one is about New Year's. This one's more about reflecting on what worked and what didn't work in 2023, and then taking that into 2024. So we're going to be going over 5 lessons that I learned this year that I think can be given as advice. I would argue that many of these lessons are pretty unique, or you probably won't see them on other videos on YouTube or blogs that you read about getting your habits in order by moving 1% at a time. Not that those things aren't helpful, but I just don't think that they're that novel. So I think that the best way to see this is to feel free to test this advice in your own lives and see what conclusions that you're able to draw for yourself. So the advice that is ordered here from most to least practical and become increasingly philosophical over a longer window of opportunity. So these are, as we kind of get to the end here, the later ones will be more philosophical and won't play out until like 50 years from now, 30 years from now, or anything like that. So you won't be able to see it immediately have impact in your 2024 experience. So the first lesson that I want to talk about is discipline being upstream of willpower. I think that the term discipline, especially in the modern kind of like you got to work boss kind of era where everybody is really uh, serving the grind, is married actually to this kind of like Puritan ideal of work ethic. I do think, of course, that discipline involves stubborn effort towards a goal and that it is a nuanced construct rather than backbreaking effort towards something difficult. But really want to kind of address that this type of discipline leans into a lot of guilt because it's very socially motivated. It's this kind of guilt that you get because you're like, oh, well, I must not be doing good because I'm not doing as well as my peers, or I'm not working as hard as my peers. And I don't really think that that's actually what it means to be disciplined technically, right? Like it is discipline again compared to other people that you do 100 push-ups and you can run a marathon, but if maybe you have a body type that just isn't suitable to marathon running, so to call that discipline just because that's the top 10% of runners doesn't really make sense for a lot of other people. And I would argue that this discipline is mainly for the sake of appearances. It's the kind of status symbol of how hard you work, which is less about the ethics of discipline and more about haranguing limited qualities of willpower. These metrics are spent time, sweat, and tears are easily comparable from person to person as people brag or lament about the hours that they spent to the god of the grind. And I know a lot of people like this. I know a lot of people who feel guilty when they're not working because they feel like, oh, I must be productive. Productivity is the thing that I do. And then they become like these kind of like people who are like Ali Abdaal and like kind of like the productivity streamers or YouTubers who really upset me. Not because I don't think that they do good work in the sense that the thing that they're saying is positive and trying to help people, but it's always wrapped up in 50 layers of like, look how much money that I made and that was what made me successful. Whatever. It's kind of cringe. And there's actually a video that I linked a few months ago on my blog or weeks ago. It's in here somewhere. That was talking about it, and I thought it was actually a really good video. I might find it and link in the description if I remember. So, in other words, I think everyone suffers from some unique list of tasks and responsibilities given the time of that they're in their life. You might have had less responsibilities before you were a father than when you're after a father, but then you'll have even less responsibilities when your kids are self-sufficient. So it's a very time-sensitive window, and a lot of things don't really make sense when you compare them linearly, even though time is experienced in a very kind of similar fashion. The sun comes up, the sun comes down Monday to Friday every single week. And I think that shaping of productivity is what causes a lot of people a lot of stress because, again, they start to compare themselves to other people. So I would argue, and I've learned from this year, that discipline is actually better mobilized at the level of systemic change that create the downstream value automatically. So what does this look like? In the modern kind of knowledge work era that we're going through right now, with the internet being what it is, and people kind of moving away from their physical homes and information kind of just becoming much more siloed on the internet and people building these digital lives, I don't think that the kind of just work harder really makes sense here. I think just work smarter also doesn't really fully make sense either. It's kind of a combination of the two. It's working hard where it's appropriate. And I do this a lot as a programmer. I try and build systems that make it really easy for me to accomplish the things that I want to accomplish. And I think that this is a important concept that a lot of people don't really have an experience with, because why would they have an experience with it? This isn't something that they'll run into that frequently, because most people are using software that was written by other people as opposed to writing their own software. And I can't fault anyone for that. I remember reading in an article, or actually I saw this on Netflix first, that 1/3 of 1% of the world knows how to code fluently. And yet we all, like 3.9 billion people, have phones or something like that. I think I actually have it. Yeah, 94% of the global population as of 2021 has mobile phones. So everybody has the internet, but most people don't know how to make the internet, for lack of a better term. So using tools like Freedom, for example, will allow you to take computation into your own hands. This is an app that allows you to block websites based on time and rule sets, where you can say block YouTube from the hours of 3 to 5 p.m. because those are the hours that I really do need to focus on what I do for work, or I need to focus on my family members or my friends, or I need to read books that I promised myself that I was going to read, or go for a run, or do these other things that I quantify as discipline. So I really wanted to make this point here, that I think that willpower is insufficient in the face of computation. Only computation can face computation head on. And that's the secrets of these tools. The secrets of these tools is that they are computable assets that talk with other computable assets at the level of your discipline. So if you implement discipline in the levels of these tools, what you'll get downstream is like, oh, well, I just found that the hours of past 7 p.m., I'm never on my phone because my phone isn't interesting, because all the websites that I would visit on my phone that make it interesting, and apps like Instagram or Twitter, are all blocked. And I can't do anything about it because I use a thing like Freedom. So a systemic relationship with this technology is using the technology against itself. So don't beat yourself up for playing a different game. This again applies to the Puritan work ethic ideal again. Don't beat yourself up because you're not doing something that your peers are able to do. It really doesn't make sense when, again, you can't compare an exact frame of reference, because you and them are actually kind of leading unique lives. But by building systems that help your disciplines and help you with the goals that you want to achieve upstream of the layers that you actually need to think about them, you'll be able to very easily leverage energy in a kind of judo-like fashion, where you'll be able to move faster and do things faster. So that's discipline, is upstream. Next, own your domain. I'm really passionate about this one. As you can see at the top left corner here, this is bramadams.dev. I own this website. So I'm just going to read this and then kind of like talk a little bit about what we got. I might paraphrase. As the landscape of social media continues to devolve into an utter shit show, fragmenting as groups of people continue to migrate to different apps where they feel the most belonging, Discords, Instagrams, TikToks, etc., social media becomes less about connection, which connection between people of loose networks, and more about delivering constant feeds of entertainment and escapism directly to our hippocampus. Due to this, in an extremely rare case of positive externality from something negative, this mass expansion of social media and the importance of being an online person and living an online life, which I will argue is important. I think a lot of people are unhappy because they feel like they're terminally online, but the internet is very new, and I think that there's a lot of good information on the internet, but there's a lot of bad information on the internet that makes it terminal, right? So it's like, it's the example of living versus living well. If you're just breathing and you're on an intubation at a hospital, you're technically alive, but you're not really living. And the same thing could be said about the usage of the internet, where it's kind of like you can be scrolling the internet or using the internet in a way that's going to make your life better or more fulfilling or more activated than kind of just an internet where you're just kind of doom scrolling and just kind of waiting until the next dopamine hit. So because of the aggressiveness of Silicon Valley and kind of getting phones in everybody's hands and the internet, the world is now fully internet connected. 94% of the world has mobile phones, which can communicate over the HTTP layer. This is great because in the virtue of everyone getting a device that can go on TikTok, you can now access the entire web from the same device, and more places and more people than ever are connected. So I'm arguing that in 2023, there's never been a better time thus far in the history of the world, where it's a time to own your own domain and take your own domain very seriously. So this current version of the blog that you're seeing, or the website, was made as a birthday gift to myself, actually late last year in January. I've had a website before. I've been managing a website and a blog for years now. I've kind of gone on and off of things like YouTube and Twitch and Twitter, and I was making creative technology stuff and posting it on Instagram for a while and building a little bit of a brand there. And then I have a tendency to nuke my social medias once every once in a while because I just really don't like social media and the way social media makes me feel. So it was a bummer because I knew I had all these interesting ideas that I wanted to share with the world. And I knew that I was building really cool stuff, but I didn't really have a venue to place it where I didn't feel like I was being subjugated to the rules of the domain of something that I didn't agree with, which in this case was like a YouTube or specifically YouTube. So this is the where the website currently stands. So it didn't have my first newsletter issue until March. This issue itself is about 40 weeks in. As of writing this one, the newsletter has over 150 members and makes about $40 of monthly revenue per month, which isn't a lot, but it's paid directly to me and it's not an intermediary. It goes directly from Stripe, from the people who subscribe to this website, into my bank account. And this is really great. You know what I mean? I've really liked the process of owning my own website. And as a matter of fact, here, let me pull up the Plausible. Okay, so you can see here that this is my website's analytic page, and you can just see all the visitors from like different places in the world. And this is always so cool to me to see how many different places in the world will visit your website. And this is again one of the advantages of the internet itself is that it's you can put information in places where people might find you and might find you interesting without having to be physically co-located with these people, which is a really important deal because the way that human information travels through the substrate of language isn't really restricted physically, and it would be a shame to convince yourself that information should be restricted physically, because why would that be the case, right? So we can see all the websites that kind of like visit from different places on the internet, from Google's to the Reddits to the GitHubs, yada yada yada, and it's just been a really fun experience. So, and I think that the point that I actually is much more important to me than these analytics that I was just talking about and people accessing it from across the world is that this website, BrahamAdams.dev, has served as the perfect playground for my creative desires. And I will just kind of like click through these links here to show you what I mean. But I've just had so much fun running a website. I've been able to make poetry where it's like, this is a poem right here about, I can just read it. If he finds himself backing into a corner, the room itself must be so, so small. Because if in his own volition he can become claustrophobic, I can't even read my own stuff, then the landscape of his mind was not expansive at all. Or I can write short stories. So here's a short story about a bird that becomes the emperor of Rome. And it was very fun to write and kind of like a combination of what it means to, like in 2023, image dumps of just kind of like me doing basically Instagram style fits whenever I feel like it. Super long essays about concepts that I think are really interesting and deep that don't necessarily fit into the newsletter variety. Shit posts, which is exactly what you think it is. It's just collections of pictures and images that I think are interesting. Videos that I've watched over the weeks. I've recently been kind of saving all of the videos and music that I've been coming across on the internet and creating these almost like sub-curated playlists, right, of different ideas. And it's just so fun to see all this stuff that I've kind of collected over the years and to be able to see how these like images and kind of like it's like a memory box, but it's even better because it's pseudo public. Zettles, which is from my Zettelkasten days and kind of like working deeply in Obsidian, which I don't use nearly as much. I'll make an issue about this later, but I've recently had a pretty big fallout with the community, and I really don't like where that community is headed personally. Creative coding, which is a really big deal to me. So to be able to kind of like, here's like my, I don't know if this sound's gonna work. Oh, it is working. So like, turning my portfolio into a Kingdom Hearts newsletter or Kingdom Hearts menu, just there's so much creativity that I've had here that I just don't think that I would have had, audio guides in here, the newsletters, of course, where I've just felt so creatively activated. I can write short posts, I can write long posts, I can make videos, I can do audio, I can upload code, I can just anything that can be run on on a web page, I can do whatever I want. So I'm literally just going to read this verbatim, this paragraph here, because I think that it kind of gets my point across. So excuse my language here, but fuck websites that tell you that your creativity is constrained to 280 characters. Fuck websites that tell you that you can only upload photos in a certain dimension to fit with the rest of the site's CSS. Fuck websites that use their networks of likes and comments to change how you think, how you speak, and how you create. Fuck subsplits with the website owner because you think that you happen to be renting a handle on their platform. Fuck the narrative that you can't grow an audience because TwitBookTube has hoovered up all of the curious minds on the internet and trapped them in their feeds to scroll forever. Fuck all that. I mean it. I think that I've made over 590 posts on the website since publishing, and I've just had so much fun. That's like about 2 posts per day. That's just how much fun that I have. This is all pretty intrinsic. Like there's, as you can tell, my extrinsic motivator of making $40 a month isn't really that compelling, but it is just such a fun creative outlet for me that I can access on my phone and my computer at any time and just kind of feel a connection with myself. It's an artifact of work, and it's a body of work that I built for myself, because of myself, almost in spite of myself. So I want you guys to have that too. If you're watching this video and you want to express yourself in an era where publishing is cheaper than it has ever been since the rise of the printing press, while also slowly building an art gallery of your mind and a work portfolio of your business, then you need to own your domain. And I really want to emphasize this point because this is going to be a video later. You'll go to the Louvre and you'll see the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, or Rembrandt, or all of these famous artists that occupy space in a museum where people of the contemporary era can consume the work of people who no longer are with us. And I find, as a creative, that would be very stressful to be working under the construct of my art is only successful if it lands in this particular art gallery. But when you're running your own website, you are the art gallery. So not only do you get to curate what pieces of art of yours you upload, it becomes all of the pieces of your art work together to kind of like create this experience that is a federated experience. So like when I showed you all those links here, they all help each other make the website more interesting, if that makes sense. And when I hit this random button, it jumps to, different stuff that I've written that you can kind of interface with and engage with. And I think that interfacing and kind of just like different shapes of these different pages kind of creates this almost really kind of like unique experience that could only happen by being a curator and an artist at the same time. Number 3, books are linear. The knowledge inside is not. So my biggest project this year was the Commonplace Bot. And what the Commonplace Bot is a Discord bot that takes in all of these quotes from books that I read over the years and then embeds them in this space where they can be accessed by natural language comparison. It's kind of complicated. I'd have to do a whole other thing. You can read the GitHub repo if you want. But it's really cool because basically I've created this bot that allows me to kind of like re-engage with quotes that I've read years ago on a level that allows me to transform them into images and quizzes and questions. And it's just a lovely experience. It's actually how I write my newsletter. So I'll literally go in here most of the time when I don't really have an idea. And recently I've been kind of gluttoned with ideas, so I haven't gotten around to like wandering lately. But when I'm out of ideas, I'll just kind of like go here and I'll be like, which question is most interesting to me? So if these 3 questions, what is the nature and balance point of the Tao of sailing? What are the 4 basic qualifications every mentor needs? And what is the definition of self-assertiveness? You'll just kind of feel a pull towards a certain question. You might not know why. It just kind of like strikes your curiosity. Maybe you're interested in Tao, or you're interested in like you're about to become a mentor, and like you feel like you want to know what qualifications you need to be a good mentor, or like you've been feeling like you've lacked self-confidence lately, so you want some self-assertiveness, and then you kind of click that question and then you dive into it, and it's just it's a good experience. I have a lot of good times. So I learned that the value of books does not actually come in their initial consumption. Ideas swell and tangle amongst one another, competing for contextual dominance in the niches that will allow them to continue to surface over and over again in the future. Any author of any individual book is like a focused laser etching deeply on their field of narrow expertise into the mind of the reader. But it's only long after the reader has read the book and their mind is cooled to the topic does the value of what was read begin to show. You might find yourself referencing an idea in conversation, or remember a fact that saves you a bunch of time on thinking about how to spend your day. Books themselves are phenomenal, from practical advice to dense philosophies to deep stories. You never really know how ideas will engage in isolation from outside their source context, and you especially can't predict what will happen when they come together. Being well read is not simply reading a lot, it is reading well. So these ideas obviously are pretty important to me with how heavily emphasized reading is on my website. And I think that a lot of these ideas are, again, that books kind of need to sit with you. They need to sit with the reader. The reader and the author are kind of in this conversation where you have to think about what the author has said long after you've consumed their work. And that's a really important process. And I think that things like Commonplace Bot have really made that process a lot easier for me, specifically the semantic search application, where I'm able to access quotes and see how quotes from different books are kind of like basically the same quote that I've highlighted multiple times, and that many of the world's best and worst ideas have been revisited over and over from these slightly different viewpoints. Some ideas are literally as old as dirt, while others are brand new. And here's a Latin thing, which is ex nihilo nihilio next ex nihilio nihil fit, which basically means nothing comes from nothing. Something always makes something else. So by setting up a third-party trusted system, which could just be a simple commonplace books, there's a commonplace book kind of YouTube craze going on right now. A lot of people are kind of getting into this idea of like journaling and stuff like that. But obviously, I use the Discord bot thing that you just saw and Readwise and services that automatically do this for me. So I don't really have to make any of these connections manually because I've written systems to do that. But you can do it manually on paper too. And I think that that's a great place to start. And these are actually 7 books that I've this year have just stuck with me, and I'll find myself thinking about them basically unprompted. So when I need an idea that from Developer Hegemony or Finite and Infinite Games or Garden's Essay on the Human Condition, I'm able to just reference it. It just comes up, and I think that that's because of those quotes kind of reintroducing themselves to me pretty consistently. Okay, number 4, most code hasn't been written. So this one is, again, we're starting to edge philosophical here. Is that as a creative technologist, this is the most exciting piece of news to me. With as dominant as software is in the 21st century and how omnipresent our phones and connectivity devices are, it can be hard to conceptualize this truth, and yet it is the case. Most code has yet to be written. Fortran in 1954, arguably the first modern programming language, was created after the discovery of DNA in 1953. So I guess to talk about this point just really quickly before we kind of like dive into the 2023 version of it, is that code is often seen as tech debt, and truly it is. I mean, sometimes you don't really, the best code to not debug is no code, right? But I don't think that most, like, if you think of code as just patterns, right? So whether it's written in C or Python or JavaScript or Rust, you're basically writing out a pattern to solve a problem. Let's say a simple problem is going to be you want to square a number. So the pattern is going to be take A and then multiply it by A. But then there's other ways that you could do it too. You could make an HTTP request to a giant database of tables of squared numbers and find it there. Or you can make an HTTP request to Amazon Turk and have some guy do it out by hand and send it back to you. So these are all different ways of solving the exact same problem, some of which are much more efficient than others. And a good goal, a goal of computer scientists everywhere is to find efficient and elegant solutions to things, as well as making them readable and maintainable well into the future. So for me, 2023 has been super special, thanks to tools like Copilot, Cursor, Stenography, and ChatGPT, which I actually made Stenography back in 2021. So it's like kind of a primordial version of these much more mature and I would argue probably better tools. And this is from the guy who made it. So, tools like Cursor and Copilot have made my coding experience just so much better. It's so much more seamless to be able to not have to Google stuff all the time. And a lot of programmers will talk about, again, because it's a defense mechanism. There's so many defense mechanisms that fire from people, especially people who comment on the internet, where their initial gut reaction is to just compulsively shit on shit. And it's just so frustrating because it's almost as if they have this presumption that everything that they write the first time is correct. Like they've never written a line of code that it doesn't compile correctly, or they misunderstood the question at hand. So to have tools like Copilot and Cursor and ChatGPT be able to just suggest to you 15 different working code blocks, right? And maybe 14 of them aren't exactly what you're looking for. Maybe 8 of them aren't what you're looking for and 7 of them are, is just, it's just a major leap forward. And to kind of like reject that from your own working process, to me, just feels like malfeasance more than anything. Or you just want the world to look like you want it to look like. It's not because it actually makes sense, right? My coding speed has gone up like velocity and acceleration by an order of magnitude. It's not even comparable. And I've been coding for well over a decade now at this point. So earlier this year, I released a series called Chats with GPT, where I followed a very simple formula. And this formula is actually kind of important. And I think that this algorithm of steps is kind of where I want to lead this to. So first, I would find a random quote from a book that I think is interesting. This can be any random quote from any book. You literally just roll the dice. And then I asked GPT to write 3 potential app ideas about said quote. Choose your favorite idea from this list and then ask GPT to pseudocode it out, and then take the pseudocode to an IDE and actually code the app. So I have some examples of that here. Here's one. So basically in this video, what I did here, I'm not logged in on this incognito window, but basically I took this quote about schedule exercise and meditation before bedtime. Here, we can actually just do this, and then I'll mute the video, and then you'll see me talking here, writing in ChatGPT MD. It's actually writing out the app code here. Let me full screen this. And then it's telling you what type of problem it is, which is the scheduling problem, right? So not only did we take our initial idea, which was a quote, schedule exercise and meditation on your calendar, follow a bedtime routine. I still told it to write an app. And then it basically created the pseudocode. And then once we were at the pseudocode level, we're kind of like off to the races, and we can kind of like make all these other links to ideas and stuff like that. And that to me was shocking, because even though a lot of the ideas were like pretty boring or pretty trite or like pretty obvious, it was like nearly 100% success rate. And there was like apps that were basically children of apps that exist in the real world, but in the scope of the quote that was passed in. And I think that this modality shifting from text to code just worked. These large language models really didn't have any qualm converting from one space to another. And I found that this was really great in my collaboration level as a software engineer, because sometimes the cold start problem is very real for programmers as well, where if you don't have a project manager breathing down your neck and telling you like, hey, you need this in by next week, and this is exactly what the ticket looks like, a lot of programmers will just kind of like sit on their hands and wait until somebody tells them what to do, which is one of the reasons that I like prefer programmers to be creative technologists who I work with, because I'd rather have them try anything and then iterate on top of what they're working on, as opposed to just waiting until somebody just comes from on high and helps them, or at least tells them what to do, and then use their programming skills there. So, this is kind of, again, a quote that I'm quoting again for emphasis, is that most code is yet to be written. We really are in this kind of early era of what programs are. And even though we have these monolith programs like Google's search algorithm and the von Neumann framework for hardware for running chips on M1 machines and stuff like that, we're really just on the tip of the emergence of kind of what software is going to represent in the human future. The same way that when the Phoenicians were first writing letters to do simple kind of tasks, they couldn't have predicted Shakespeare or the printing press or all these other things that have come about in the world of writing, Harry Potter. So we've merely scratched the surface, and I'm excited because I think 2024 and 2023 have been a great time to leverage LLMs for modern programming. And it's really just made programming such a much more fun and an interesting experience. Okay, almost done. Number 5, information self-catalyzes but evades crystallization. So 2023 started with my 10,000 word summary of my PKM work with Obsidian in my Bramsey's highly opinionated vault. From here, I've learned more about, or from that point when I made the BHOV, I've learned more about what information is. It's kind of like my new style of making information. I've actually, again, moved away kind of from Obsidian, and recently started using tools like Trello, because it's just a really good Kanban, and Cal Newport's time block planner, and Ghost, when I'm trying to do anything that I feel is even slightly publishable, I'll just go ahead and publish it, because again, I own the domain, and if I want to take it down, I can just take it down. If I want to leave it up, I can leave it up. But everyone who's in the modern knowledge economy has either just to-do lists strewn about their apartment, or long unfinished manuscripts about the future of the history of computing, which that's me, because I started like a thing in 2023 writing a manuscript and then kind of gave up. So 2023 helped me realize that the flow of information isn't scarce. If you've ever done meditation or anything like that, you'll realize that the constant noise of idea and stimulus from these internal and external loci of ourselves, it's almost impossible to actually stop the flow of them. It's the concentration of reliable, worthwhile information that's difficult to acquire. It's basically garbage in, garbage out. Are you consuming really good information and producing really good information? And I think that those two are actually much more heavily linked than we would give them credit for, because, someone can be a cracked guitarist and then have a terrible drug addiction, or someone could be really good at making pots, but then a terrible husband or a terrible wife. And I think that this kind of input output of experiences of the world, addicted to news, just constantly surrounded by bad thoughts, is actually a more telling of the types of things that you'll create in your creative life. So in the latter half of 2023, I put a lot of effort into creating passive capture nodes for my work. These flywheels and arbitrage, introduced from the very beginning of projects, reveal gold nuggets that only play out before the deliverable layer. So basically, I wrote this whole issue about flywheels, but what I do is that I just screen record when I'm doing anything that I think is interesting. It's literally that simple. I screen record and then I put it on an external drive, and then I may or may not review it later. The value of these things are multiple, and I write about it a lot in the Zero Waste Flywheel. But I think a lot of the times we assume that the value of what we do is going to be the actual end product. And in some ways, that is the case because that's the thing that people pay for. But you can only really introspect on the product that you're making because of the and I talk about this in the piece. The cost of the flow state is flow. So when you're in flow, you're so busy focusing on what you're doing that everything else that's happening around you becomes mute. It's like a volume slider, where so you're working really hard on this one thing and you're so zoned in that everything else just basically becomes quiet. And by using self-surveillance, as I call it in the Zero Waste Flywheel issue, or maybe that's another issue about arbitrage, you can actually counter that experience and add value back into the system where the value wouldn't be found before. So to capture your best ideas is to work on eliminating noise from other people's lives and highlighting the best of our own life's work, which actually again ties back to own your own domain, which was number 2, because you really get to do your best work. Okay, now let's talk about predictions and close out this long video. So here are my predictions for 2024. These predictions are a little bit out there on purpose. I did not want to go with obvious predictions like more crazy weather events like hurricanes or news about obvious thing happening from some inane world government through dictatorship or just regular politics kind of malaise. That said, I could see each of these actually happening in the next 365 days. So things that happened before December 31st, 2024. So I'll just read these out and then maybe talk a little bit about each of them, a few sentences. So the Apple Vision Pro flops commercially, but succeeds in birthing a developer who will change the AR VR game in less than 3 years. They will reference the Vision Pro as their inspiration, and the Vision Pro will become mainstream at that point, which is a similar story to the iPad. What I mean here is that I think that AR is going to work compared to VR. I don't think VR works because me and many other people who I've talked to who've used VR headsets but didn't want to sound like a bummer to their friends actually get super nauseous in VR in a way that's just not, it's just, it never gets better. I remember when I first started using like Walkabout VR and VR games like that, I would get so sick that I would just have to lie in bed the rest of the day. So for playing 2 hours of a dumb golf game, I like basically gunshot the rest of my day, and I had to just like lie in bed, and that was just a miserable experience. But I do think AR works because of things like the Apple Watch, AirPods, Pete, how many times a person will pull their phone out of their pocket. You can check on your iPhone how many times you pick up your phone per day, and it's always shocking. It's like in the hundreds for a lot of people, myself included. But I think that the Apple Vision Pro and what it represents for AR is that even though it's kind of bulky and it probably won't take off immediately because it looks a little bit like ski goggles, and people will have to figure out when it's appropriate to wear these things versus like when it's not appropriate. And does it make you a target for crime because people will just rip it off of your head? Whereas like with AirPods, people don't really want to rip your gross AirPods out of your head. But if you're on a train and, somewhere where pickpocketing is common, people will be ripping that Apple Vision Pro off your head. I can guarantee it. So like, I don't think that it'll work mainstream just yet. It'll probably be more of a replacement for you're sitting in your chair at home or on your couch like they showed in the videos. But I do think that there's going to be a developer who's going to really get into ARKit, who's going to make some libraries and some apps that are really going to change people's interaction with these devices. So I've been building AR for years, actually, and I'll show you just real quick some AR stuff that I've made. So here's like a video that I made back in like 2020 where I like scanned myself using this 3D app, and then I used ARKit and Swift AR and GPT-3 as an API to talk through my AirPods, turn that into text to speech or speech to text, and then talk with GPT and then have it reverse. And now like this is what you get. You get me talking to myself, right? So I think that there's a lot of really interesting, funny comedy that's going to happen from like the AR world. Like here's me getting into a fist fight with a cube, saying that it's important to square up.
Square up, dude. Square up, bro. Come on. Square up.
Right. So I think that we're gonna get there. But so we're gonna get there because like, with AR development, one of the things that was really stressful and struggle inducing was just how you were just placing 3D objects from Blender in real space. And, we're going to see more interaction between like finger tapping and, kind of like different people having different AR devices and seeing 3D objects in real space, which is going to, I think, cause some pretty emergent things to happen. Specifically, obviously, now that speech to text and text to speech has gotten so much better, and tools like GPT-3 are really good, or GPT-4 are really good at natural language processing. So I think that that's going to be a big deal. Twitter goes bankrupt, but does not disappear. Yeah, I think that I'm pretty confident that Elon Musk is running this fucking company into the ground, which actually I'm pretty happy about because I hate Twitter and I'm not even, what is that, ashamed about it. I don't know. I hate that website. It's a stupid website. It's a bad website and I wish it would go away forever. But I do think it's going to go bankrupt. Obviously, the way that they've been chasing away advertisers, and advertisers, I think, are kind of like birds of a feather flock together a little bit. And even though there's a lot of people who are still using Twitter, I think the consumption pattern of Twitter has become a lot more frenetic and a lot more based around kind of like immediacy of events than kind of like, again, building these slow connections where people are like, I've just been microblogging interesting tweets for 4 years and everything I say kind of attracts my followers. So I think that that's gone because of the way that Elon has chosen to run the company. But I don't think it'll disappear. I just think it'll go bankrupt. It'll be owned by the banks. And then I don't know what's going to happen to him and SpaceX and all those other companies afterwards. So GPT agents will begin to pop up in places that QR menus and point of sale iPads exist. People get used to talking about agents in a variety of scenarios. I actually made another video about this in another newsletter where I go deep into this topic. But basically the idea is that GPTs are going to be kind of like websites where you're going to start seeing them a lot more commonly in places that don't really seem like they would use GPTs. So colleges and museums and restaurants and movie theaters and, conversations with the actors while you're in a movie theater where you could like text them about the movie or take a picture of what frame that you're at in the movie. And they're like, oh my God, I love this part. Like spoiler warning for what comes next. And all of this stuff is doable with today's technology. I've been working on this technology for 3+ years now. I'm very confident in saying this. It's just if people are going to culturally get there, which I have no control over, but I'm going to continue to build the stuff that I want. The 2024 US election will cause the Republican Party to officially fracture. I think we've been seeing this already. I actually don't know much about politics because I really don't follow politics that much. But from what I do know with Santos and Trump and the RNC and how it spends money, I think specifically the Trump cabal is going to, especially because he's going to be, it seems, running again for office and is the main Republican candidate in 2024, cause the Republican Party to just like fracture. I don't know if it will fracture in a way that's going to be inherently visible in the 2028 election or even the 2032 election, but I do think that it's going to be notable that the Republican Party isn't the Republican Party that we knew it to be in the Reagan-Nixon era. TikTok banned by the White House or Congress in a bid to get mind share back from the Gen Alpha community, which is overturned by the Supreme Court. This one feels kind of obvious, but this one's actually more relevant to just kind of technology in general, where the government is kind of like in a reactive position to the private sector in a lot of ways when it comes to software technology. Whereas like with hardware technology, it was really hard to get a bunch of chemicals, right? Like unless you were Mary Curie and you worked at an institution of like a school that was going to be able to provide you, you know, a bunch of funding so that you could get a bunch of research materials that weren't accessible. And then a lot of those schools actually did have collaborations with their parent governments, you know, specifically even the Ivy League schools and private schools have endowments that work with the, you know, government kind of investment protocols and things like that and bonds and stuff. But I don't think that the internet works like that. Like there's always just people who are just kids in the Philippines making viruses or websites that changed the entire world. And I mean that from both categories, like the I love you virus thing from like the 90s or early 2000s, which nuked like billions of dollars of revenue to like LeftPad going down because the developer was pissed about corporations and capitalism. It's I think that the government is kind of in a position, the US government in particular, where it's just kind of playing this game of like cat and mouse with individuals making really powerful software. And that's only going to get more intense because of large language models. Self-help books become less passion focused and more PKM focused in a bid to get people more realistic about happiness. I should have wrote more about books because obviously I try to read a lot of books. But yeah, I think that the self-help genre passion thing is just kind of so overdone at this point. The Atomic Habits and stuff like that. Not that there aren't bad books. I actually really liked Atomic Habits and I love Deep Work. And I think that a lot of these books were actually very important to helping me kind of take those initial steps into entrepreneurship and feel a lot more confident with myself and the type of value that I would provide to my future clients at the time, and also to kind of like build product that I cared about. But I don't think that the self-help kind of good feel, kind of the subtle art of not giving a fuck is going to make sense in a world where software is starting to overtake the human psyche, where software was kind of like inert before, and like you had a lot of software that was kind of emergent, kind of like YouTube recommendation feeds or buying things off of Amazon or scrolling now. It's completely the die is shifted, right? Software has proven that it's not going anywhere, but even more importantly, it's actually increasing in value the more that it learns. And when that happens, I think that people are going to need systems to maintain themselves, organization systems, PKM systems, things like Obsidian, things like Notion are going to be less of a nice to have and more of like a I need this to function in this world that we live in. So I think there's going to be more books about that. And then finally, the last one, being a YouTuber becomes a much less profitable career path. It was in pre-COVID to 2022, as the ad bubble runs into inflation, a direct competition of short videos, eliminating community building because of 15-second memes and a saturation of sponsors. As such, low-cost, high-value info products like podcasts and blogs become more popular. So yeah, I mean, this one also feels relatively self-explanatory to me. How many YouTube videos do you go across where they're introducing a new VPN product or a new like drink product that they're selling? And the answer is a lot. And then how many ads do you skip immediately after the 5 seconds is played or install an ad blocker, and then YouTube gets into fight with ad blocks all the time? And again, another cat and mouse game between Google, the corporation, and people building ad block software. I just think that the YouTuber really heavily edited kind of like video style isn't, it's like this weird middle ground between what a studio can do because it raises a few $1,000,000 to make a feature film, and what a person can do like me in my bedroom with a camera and a microphone. And I think that we're going to get more people again just talking at their microphone for a period of time, and for a long period of time, and then maybe interjecting a sponsor every once in a while, because that type of lifestyle, I just don't think it was sustainable. A lot of the ad bubble was because a lot of these companies thought like, oh, okay, like it's a fair market, but there's actually a lot of subprime advertising where certain advertisers are lied to by the mediums that they post on, for lack of a better term, because they just don't know how much money that they're actually pulling in and what view counts mean on Facebook versus what they mean on Twitter and all those kind of conversion metrics. So I'm pretty confident about this one. Oh, specifically also because of TikTok and just what it's done to communities as a whole. Like when you follow a TikToker, you'll never see them again. You know what I mean? So you'll like see a video in your feed and you're like, this person seems pretty interesting. You'll hit the little plus button. But because of the nature of the feed and TikTok never sends you from the For You feed to the following feed, I think a way that they could fix this is like 75% of the time or 50 to 75% of the time, you were just automatically sent to the following feed instead of the For You feed. Or if the following feed came before the For You feed. You know what I mean? Like there are ways to fix this, but they don't want to do that because they want to continue to collect data on you and make this kind of infinite cycle of just kind of engagement. And YouTube is doing that now too with YouTube Shorts, and of course that's cannibalizing people's YouTube platform strategies as well as independent YouTubers. Which again brings me to number 2, folks. Scroll. Own your domain. Own your thing first and then think about spreading out your little wings. But yeah, so that was my reflections for 2023 and my predictions for 2024. This video is already 46 minutes long, so I'm going to stop talking. But yeah, I think it was a really good year. I learned a lot. I'm excited for next year. I think that there's some really cool stuff on the horizon. I'll probably be spending most of my year working on lower level tools for agents, as well as kind of building a few agents that I think are pretty exciting and interesting. And I have some pretty cool agents coming out and GBTs coming out in the near future that kind of like fit this category of stuff that people are like, oh, I didn't know agents could do that. And I know because again, I've built them in a very unique kind of way. So, and then just continually to work on my website and my newsletter, really passionate about this kind of process and how creative I can be with the poetry and the creative coding at all. But it's a great year to be a coder. It's a great year to be a writer. It's a great year to be a thinker. I think that, you know, the world itself is going to be going through a lot of trauma, obviously, because of wars and the increasing kind of misinformation campaigns and stuff like that on the internet, but as well as kind of inflation and, you know, very real problems, sickness, health, and everything like that. But I think that if we can pare ourselves down and prepare for the best, or prepare for the worst and hope for the best, that 2024 can actually be a relatively sane year, even though it's going to be a crazy election year here in the US. So thank you for watching. The best way to support this is to sign up for the newsletter. So please do come to bramadams.dev and sign up here so you can get a newsletter in your inbox every Sunday if you're watching this on YouTube. And we'll have a lot of fun. So thanks for watching. Catch you later. See you.